Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I am the Omni viewer, and this bit of news was very unexpected. I am a big fan of Edgar Rice Burroughs. I think he's might be one of my favorite authors, and I've covered his stuff a couple of times on this channel. Specifically, I did a Kaiju Lit Circle on the Castback trilogy, or as you may better know it, the Land That Time Forgot trilogy, and also did a little video about Pellucidar, particularly how it inspired the Hollow Earth of the Monsterverse. And I've been meaning to cover more of his stuff, certainly, because I really do like his writing. I think he had a pretty big influence on my own writing, in fact. But when it comes to what my favorite of his works are, most people know him as the guy who came up with Tarzan. And Tarzan, of course, got the most media, probably because he was the easiest one to adapt. But I like his more fantastical stuff. And I have a special place in my heart for the Barsoom series, also known as the John Carter of Mars series. That was how Burroughs got his start in writing, and my word, these books really do transport you. They have such great world building, but it doesn't feel like it ever gets bogged down by it. It's woven in with the character development and the plot development so expertly. And it's a completely different world. Barsoom is just the native word for Mars, in case you didn't know. I mean, you probably guessed it with the John Carter of Mars being the alternate title, but he makes Mars feel like a truly inhabited and living, thriving world. You gotta read these things. They might, in fact, be among the most influential sci fi fantasy novels ever made. A strong argument exists that if Burroughs had never written the John Carter books, we probably wouldn't have things like Flash Gordon, Superman, Star Wars, so many of these different works that people love these days, but you can find the seeds planted in the Barsoom novels. So it's kind of weird that even though the Barsoom novels are really popular among sci fi fans and among Burroughs fans in particular, they're not really adapted all that much. Again, you can find elements that make their way into other works, but you don't really see any attempt made to directly adapt them. The highest profile one was when Disney released its live action John Carter movie, originally entitled John Carter of Mars, but they removed the of Mars part due to some ridiculous superstition that the movie would fail if they included the word Mars in the title. Except that didn't help because the movie failed anyway, for many, many reasons, too many to list here. But let us just say that it was released exactly a century after the first book was published, and it was not worth the wait. Around the same time, The Asylum released a John Carter of Mars movie as a knockbuster to capitalize on that. But you can probably already guess the quality of that film because it's an Asylum production. Before that, though, people were trying, most famously Bob Clampett, and yes, that Bob Clampett, the one who directed Looney Tunes back in the day, wanted to try making an animated John Carter of Mars adaptation. And you can find some test animations that survived, and if you dig deep enough, you might even be able to find them right here on YouTube. They looked pretty good, but obviously that project never got off the ground. I, for one, think animation would be the way to go if you want to adapt the Barsoom stories, because we're not just talking about a jungle or an island or a prehistoric looking landscape that you can easily replicate by going out and shooting in a Sahara savanna type area. This is a completely alien world with completely alien creatures and completely alien technology, although still somehow medieval technology. So, going with animation would be the best way to make it all look consistent and have it be a truly believable setting. Now, obviously, the Bob Clampett project never happened, but it's about to, or at least if all goes well, it's about to. Okay, so this is the big announcement. An animated Barsoom series is being developed by Michael Koge, I think that's how you pronounce his name, in conjunction with the Burroughs estate. Now, Michael Koge has a lot of writing experience in the Star Wars universe, particularly writing novels, both adult and junior. But he has also written a John Carter of Mars audio drama. I have not listened to it at this point, so I don't know how it went. But he does have some familiarity with the series, and he's developing it with the Burroughs estate, as I mentioned. Now, the announcement didn't say where the series is going to debut, so my guess is they're developing it, but they haven't really shopped it around yet. They're probably going to aim for one of the major streaming platforms, say Netflix or Amazon Prime. Maybe try to go for one of the other subscription ones like HBO Max or Disney Plus or something. Or it might land on Tubi for all we know. But at this point, we only know that it's in development, not where it's going to be. So it must be very early in the development stage. Now, how do I feel about this announcement? Well, I'm a big fan of the Barsoom series, like I said, and I want to be excited for this. I really do. There are there is one thing about the announcement that does make me wonder, though. You see, in part of the announcement, Koge talks about animated series like Blood of Zeus, Castlevania, and Twilight of the Gods. Now, I have to imagine he mentioned those deliberately because they might be. When you mention a series, another series in conjunction with the one you're developing, you're generally doing so because there's some sort of thematic or visual or stylistic connection there. Mentioning the series that people already know that are already out there plants the idea of what kind of series you are developing when you make your announcement. Now, those particular works are all considered adult animation, and they do not shy away from the adult content, particularly not Twilight of the Gods. So, the reason I'm wondering is because, you know, those particular series, they have their adult content and they also tend to sensationalize it a little. And with the Barsoom novels, I don't see them as particularly sensationalized, even though they are indeed pulp novels. For example, this is a Martian civilization, it's true, and they do have long range gun technology, but most of the fighting is done with swords, and swords are pretty brutal weapons. So you can imagine a battle scene where John Carter and Tars Tarkas are slicing their way through enemy hordes. There's going to be some dismemberment. The books don't necessarily get too graphic in describing the violence. It's mostly just Carter describing the thrill he feels when he is in the thick of battle, because that's where he's in his element. But it doesn't talk about like the viscera as the sword slices through people or something. And then, of course, there is the nudity. Or is it nudity? This is actually a huge subject of debate in the Burroughs fandom. In the first two or three Barsoom novels, Burroughs' narration describes Martians as naked, and fans have been debating what that means ever since. Uh, when I say naked, of course, he does add the caveat that they wear jewelry to denote social status, armor and harnesses for weapons when they're going into battle, and they'll bundle up in heavy cloaks when they're in the freezing polar regions. But otherwise, he describes them as naked. Now, when you're talking about the green Martians, who are these 10-foot tall, four-armed, tusked ogres that you can barely tell the difference between the males and the females, that's not such a big deal. When it comes to, say, the red Martians, who do look like humans, it's a little bit different. And like I said, fans have been debating exactly what that means. A lot of fans take the term literally and figure Martians just don't wear clothes. They don't dress like this. They wear the jewelry, but otherwise they're Starkers the whole time. Other fans consider that naked could have more than one meaning back in the time when those novels were written. For example, in certain Tarzan novels, Tarzan is described as naked by certain characters, even though in those scenes he's wearing his loincloth. So he's not buck naked, he's just naked in comparison to the people around him. For my own part, I tend to go with the former description because, you actually read what's being described, particularly when Deja Thoris is talking about it. It seems pretty clear that at least in those first novels, that was the intention. In later novels, it changes. But in the first few novels, that I'm pretty sure he meant no clothes. Although, whatever interpretation you go with, the romance between John Carter and Deja Thoris is one of the most wholesome literary love stories you'll ever read, no matter what state of dress they're in. So I don't want to give the impression that these are like steamy, spicy, ooh, so scandalous kind of books. They're not. But we're talking about an adaptation here. And I do worry that perhaps it'll go in the direction of, if they really are going in the adult animation direction and they're going to adapt that literally, they might make it salacious. Or maybe they'll do something like what Dynamite Comics did when they adapted the novels and do strategically placed jewelry, let us say. I would show you what I mean, but I don't want to get this video demonetized, so you'll just have to take my word for it at the moment and look it up on your own time. Anyway, my main point is that I do worry if the series might get sensationalized. The other thing I'm concerned about is the possibility that the story will be unnecessarily updated to suit modern sensibilities, or modern sensibilities in quotes, I should say. You know what I'm talking about. Sticking to the kinds of cliches that so many different sci-fi and action movies have tried to embrace these days that it's pretty clear audiences don't want. And the first movie, the Disney movie, did kind of do that in some areas, though I don't really want to get into too much detail about that. But I just want to say right now, I do not think that these novels need updating. Yes, they were written in 1912, but you might actually be surprised at how good the characters are. Take Deja Thoris, for example, the titular princess of Mars in the first book. Now, at a glance, somebody could look at the plot of the book and say, oh, well, she's the love interest and she gets captured, so she's just a damsel in distress. She's not a progressive character at all. She's just a weak female character from the time, and she needs to be updated. And that's what I fear might happen. I fear they might try to make Deja Thoris into a girl boss. But as someone who has read the book, I can tell you Deja Thoris is already very powerful as just on her own. Let me put it this way. Yes, she is a prisoner when we first meet her. Her ship was shot down by the Green Martians. She's taken prisoner. John Carter, who is also kind of a prisoner, but also kind of not at that point, doesn't really know who she is. But then we get this scene where Deja Thoris is brought before Talhaeus, who is the current ruler of that particular Green Martian tribe. And basically, she's brought there to be told what her options are as a prisoner, and none of them are good. And she delivers this speech about how the Red Martians and the Green Martians should not be enemies. They would be better off as allies. We need to unite our people and we will be stronger together. And it is such a good speech that it almost wins over every single Green Martian there, particularly Tars Tarkas, who is himself very atypical for a Green Martian. But it doesn't work. And the only reason it doesn't work is because Talhaeus is in charge and he's a cruel, vile creature. But the point is, Deja Thoris almost brokers peace between two warring peoples from the position of being a prisoner. That's impressive. You gotta admit, that is quite a feat to do. And I don't think that's a character who needs upgrading to be a strong, powerful woman because she already is a strong, powerful woman. Just adapt her the way she was written in the original book. That would be my advice anyway. But who knows? Like I said, I'm not really familiar with how Koge has adapted the Barsoom novels in his audio drama at this point. Maybe he does get it. Maybe he has no intention of updating the story in that way. Updating certain elements just because you have to change certain things with the medium, maybe. I mean, stuff's going to get changed in adaptation no matter what. But I just hope he doesn't update it in the wrong ways. Still, though, I mean, we don't know anything else at this point, and hey, it's possible that this will be yet another project that falls through. I hope it's not, and I hope if it does get developed that it will actually be good. But I guess we'll see. Otherwise, hey, I'm going to be keeping my eye on this one. Until such time as we meet again, this is the Omni Viewer signing off.